You know what's strange? There are people in this world who just know things, not in a mystical or supernatural way, but in a way that is deeply, quietly unsettling to everyone around them. They walk into a situation and something shifts inside them before a single word is spoken. They meet someone for the first time, and within minutes they have already sensed something about that person that takes everyone else months to figure out. They feel the ending of something long before it ends, the departure of someone long before they leave, the collapse of something long before it falls. And the strangest part is they are almost always right. They cannot always explain how they knew, they just did. And that knowing, that quiet, persistent, often lonely knowing, is one of the most fascinating and least understood psychological experiences there is. For a long time, science dismissed this kind of knowing as coincidence, as the brain finding meaning where none existed. But the research tells a very different story. Neuroscientist Dr. Antonio Damasio at the University of Southern California spent decades studying how the human brain processes information below the level of conscious awareness. His landmark research introduced what he called the somatic marker hypothesis, the idea that the body stores emotional and experiential data from every situation a person has ever encountered, and uses that stored data to generate physical signals, a feeling in the gut, a tightening in the chest, a sudden inexplicable unease, before the conscious mind has had time to catch up. Sit with that for a moment. What most people call a gut feeling is not imagination. It is the brain's deep processing system delivering a conclusion that conscious reasoning has not yet arrived at. And it gets deeper. Dr. Elaine Aron, whose research identified the highly sensitive person, found that approximately 20% of the population processes both sensory and emotional information at a significantly deeper level than average. These individuals absorb more data from every interaction, every environment, every relationship. They process it faster, deeper, and with greater emotional precision than most people ever will. The result is not someone who predicts the future. It is someone who processes the present at a level most people never access. And that difference, subtle as it sounds, changes everything about how they move through the world. But here is where it gets deeply personal. Because for many people this ability did not develop randomly. It was built, carefully, quietly, and often painfully, by circumstances that required it. Psychologists who study early childhood development have found a consistent pattern among people with unusually heightened intuition. A significant number of them grew up in environments that were emotionally unpredictable, homes where the atmosphere could shift without warning, where a parent's mood determined the entire temperature of the house, where the difference between a good day and a painful one had to be read, not from words, but from footsteps on the floor above, from silences that lasted too long, from the specific way a door closed. Dr. Gabor Maté, whose research on the long-term effects of childhood stress has reshaped how psychologists understand adult behavior, describes this process with extraordinary precision. When a child grows up in an environment where emotional safety is inconsistent, the brain does something remarkable. It begins to prioritize threat detection above almost everything else. The nervous system becomes exquisitely attuned to subtle signals, micro-expressions, shifts in tone, changes in energy, patterns that repeat across situations and relationships. The child is not developing a sixth sense, they are developing a survival system. One so refined and so deeply wired into their nervous system that by adulthood it operates almost entirely below the level of conscious thought. They sense things before they happen not because they are extraordinary, but because their brain was trained by necessity to see further than most. Now here is what most people never understand about this experience. The sensing is not mystical, it is neurological. Research in cognitive neuroscience has shown that the human brain processes approximately 11 million bits of information per second. Of that 11 million, the conscious mind is only aware of roughly 40. The remaining 10,999,960 bits are processed entirely beneath awareness. For most people, that unconscious processing produces nothing particularly notable. But for people with heightened perceptual sensitivity, people whose nervous systems were trained early to absorb and analyze everything, that unconscious processing produces something extraordinary. A constant stream of conclusions, warnings, recognitions, and predictions that arrive in consciousness not as logical arguments but as feelings, as knowing, as a quiet certainty that has no visible source. Dr. Gary Klein, a cognitive psychologist who spent years studying expert intuition in high-stakes environments, firefighters, military commanders, emergency room physicians, found something remarkable. The most effective decision-makers in any field were not the ones who deliberated the longest. They were the ones whose brains had accumulated enough pattern recognition to generate accurate conclusions almost instantaneously. Now pause here for a moment. The person in your life who always seems to know, who sensed the betrayal before it happened, who felt the shift in the relationship before anyone admitted it, who knew the situation was wrong before there was a single piece of evidence, that person is not lucky. They are not paranoid. They are not overthinking. They are operating from a processing system of extraordinary depth and precision, and the conclusions it generates deserve far more trust than they are usually given. But here is what nobody talks about: the weight of always knowing, because sensing things before they happen sounds like a gift, and in many ways it genuinely is, but it carries a cost that is rarely acknowledged and almost never understood by the people around them. Imagine knowing that something is wrong before you can prove it. Imagine feeling the end of something while everyone around you is still celebrating the beginning. Imagine carrying a certainty so deep and so clear that you cannot explain it in words, and watching people dismiss it, minimize it, tell you that you are imagining things. This is where the exhaustion enters. The nervous system of someone who is constantly processing at this level never fully rests. Every room is being read, every person is being felt, every situation is being quietly assessed beneath the surface, even when the person desperately wants to simply be present without analyzing everything around them. Neuroscientist Dr. Stephen Porges, whose polyvagal theory revolutionized how researchers understand the nervous system, found that a system trained for hypervigilance from an early age does not simply switch off when the original threat is gone. The body continues scanning, continues detecting, continues preparing, long after the environment that created the need has disappeared. It is like having a radar system that cannot be switched off, extraordinarily useful, quietly relentless, and after years of operating at that frequency, genuinely, deeply exhausting. And here is where the loneliness enters. Because people who sense things before they happen are almost always misunderstood, and that misunderstanding has a specific and measurable psychological cost. They are called paranoid when they sense danger others cannot see, pessimistic when they feel an ending others refuse to acknowledge, oversensitive when they pick up on tension nobody else has noticed yet, difficult when they cannot simply relax into a situation their nervous system is quietly and persistently warning them about. What the people around them rarely understand is that the warnings are almost never wrong. The sensing is almost never random. Psychologist Dr. Kristin Neff, whose research at the University of Texas focuses on self-compassion and emotional validation, found something that cuts directly to the heart of this experience. When a person's inner knowing is repeatedly dismissed by the people closest to them, they do not stop sensing. They stop sharing what they sense. They carry it alone. They watch situations unfold exactly as they knew they would, and they say nothing, because they have learned that being right is not always the same as being believed. And that specific silence, the silence of someone who knew, who said nothing, and who watched it happen anyway, is one of the loneliest places a person can live. Here is what the research ultimately says about people who carry this ability, and it deserves to be said clearly and without qualification. The capacity to sense things before they happen, to read beneath the surface of situations, to feel the emotional truth of a moment before it becomes visible, to know in the body what the conscious mind has not yet confirmed. This is not anxiety. It is not paranoia. It is not a trauma response pretending to be wisdom. It is a genuine, measurable, and increasingly well-understood cognitive capacity. Researcher Dr. Ap Dijksterhuis at Radboud University, whose work on unconscious thought theory found that for complex decisions involving large amounts of emotional and social data, the unconscious mind consistently outperforms conscious deliberation. The brain processing things beneath awareness, the felt sense, the gut conclusion, the knowing without knowing why, is not less reliable than logical analysis. In many situations involving human behavior and relationships, it is significantly more reliable. These are people who have been paying extraordinarily close attention for a very long time, to people, to patterns, to the space between what is said and what is meant, to the subtle signals that precede every significant event. They do not sense the future. They read the present with a depth and precision that makes the future feel almost inevitable, and that is not a burden. That is one of the rarest forms of intelligence there is. So if you are someone who has spent your life sensing things before they happen, feeling endings before they arrive, knowing things you cannot explain, carrying certainties that no one around you can yet see, here is what matters most. You are not paranoid. You are not anxious. You are not too much. You are someone whose brain has been paying extraordinarily close attention for a very long time, processing everything, storing everything, connecting patterns that most people never notice long enough to remember. Dr. Antonio Damasio, whose research opened this conversation, put it simply: the body knows before the mind admits. And the people who have learnt to listen to that knowing, who have developed the quiet courage to trust what they sense, even when the world around them offers no confirmation, those people are not burdened by their awareness. They are guided by it. Trust what you know, even when you cannot yet explain it, even when no one around you can see it yet. The knowing was never the problem. The only question is whether you are finally ready to stop apologizing for it. If this felt like something you have carried quietly for most of your life, leave a comment below. I read every single one.